Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today's session is about the dance of making things happen and allowing life to unfold. So I'm going to start off with a story, as I always do. The story is by this famous author, Michael Singer, who is an entrepreneur and best-selling New York Times author. So he shares a story about his surrender experiment. So back in 1980s, he was doing his PhD. And so this guy registers for his PhD program in finance. And then he gets into the spiritual journey where he's embarking on this practice of deepening himself. And he comes to the point where all he wants to do all day is meditate. He wants to just go away into a cave and just sit down and really enjoy the bliss that he's been experiencing. But then a friend of his talks him into going ahead and actually completing his PhD program that he's registered. And he has 3 more classes to finish. He has to go take the test and clear them, and that's it. And he'll be done with his program. And he'll be a doctor. And then so he does that. He goes and registers, and then he actually studies for 2 of his classes. And one of them, he has absolutely no preparation whatsoever. And then it's time for his exam. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to fail. So why even bother? I'm going to drop out of this PhD program. I'm just going to meditate anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and surrender this. But then his friend comes back and he then compels him and says, no. Go finish. Go just take the test. You never know. You might get through and then you'll be done with it. So the exam is tomorrow. So Michael Singer opens up the book the night before the exam. And he randomly selects 3 chapters in the entire book, and he reads them. The next morning, he wakes up before his exam, does the same thing, picks up the book, randomly opens up, looks at 3 chapters, and then reads them in this, thick volume of information. And then he says, okay, you know what? I'm going to actually practice the surrender, which I have been studying and learning through this meditation program. So he goes and appears at the exam, fully surrendered and knowing that he's going to fail. He's pretty sure. And he says, you know what? The failure is going to go ahead and tame my ego and make me wake up, make me a better human being devoid of this compulsion to be able to control the outcomes and this perfectionism. So he goes and sits down at his exam, and there are 6 questions. And a person is asked to take 3, is required to answer 3 of those 6 questions. So the guy goes and looks at the 6 questions, and 3 of the questions are exactly those 3 chapters that he happened to read. Takes the exam, walks away, makes an A, and he gets a recognition by his dean for his exemplary performance. And he uses that story to write his bestseller book, The Surrender Experiment, where he says, sometimes you think you're in control. You have this illusion that you want to be in control, and your best outcome comes out of being completely having that task in your hand completely within your grip. But actually, that's an illusion. You have nothing really under your control. And you're really an instrument of a machinery, a universal machinery that has far greater intelligence than you can imagine. So a master is one who allows things to happen. He or she just shapes things as they come through them. And then he or she steps away and watches them unfold. Life as you know it has a plan for you. It knows what it wants to do through you. So I tell you, 10 years ago, when I left the tech world and I walked away from all of this comfort of the known, the thing that I could control, that all of the left brain activity that I ever trained for, it was a leap of faith. It was jumping off a cliff, and I didn't even know if there was going to be a net. But there was one inspirational words of wisdom that I had heard. I believe it was Eckhart Tolle who first said this, or maybe he heard it from somebody else, but I heard it from Eckhart Tolle. He said, do not ask what you want to do in life or what I want to do. Instead, ask what does the universe want to do through you? Or in this case, what does the universe wants to do through me? And I tell you folks, that one mantra shifted everything. Every day when I sit down to meditate, it's a surrender experiment. I'm surrendering to that higher cause, to that higher being, to that greater power, call it by whatever name you want, and saying, me being here today, we being here today, just even if you understand, look at the circumstances, the chances that brought upon this moment for us to be able to be here alive, aware, awake, looking, experiencing, enjoying, hearing things, is a chance, a miraculous set of coincidences that made this possible. So if you trust in that machinery that's working and allow that to manifest through you, then you don't have the stress. You don't have the anxiety. You don't have to have that great power that you try to exude through you, pretending as if you're really in control, which ultimately tends to drain you. And so I want to share with you an experiment or an experience of how, when you surrender, how things work from my own life. So last year, I was on a camper van tour of Central and Eastern Europe. I was going through Romania, and I had been through this place called Transfargașani, which is one of the most beautiful roads in the world, they say. So I'd been through that. We're just coming out of winter. It's in the month of May, so we're just coming out of winter. The snow is beginning to melt. The roads are beginning to open up. And then I was trying to get from Romania to Hungary. Okay, so it's about a 6-hour drive, and just kind of getting 2-ish in the afternoon. I was like, okay, I need to hustle and I need to get to Hungary. And so, come down the mountain and I'm heading towards Hungary border. And then the gasoline or the diesel in my vehicle, in my camper van, begins to start hitting empty. And, I knew at that point, I had been driving that vehicle for about a month at that point. So I knew that when it starts getting to the point of E, I probably have, say, 20 kilometers ahead of me, right? Still in the tank. So I started driving and say, 20 kilometers, I'm out of this, tourist area. I want to just kind of get away, hit the highway. Once it started rolling, I thought I'm going to pull over somewhere. So I started driving, and I'm noticing that I'm coming to what looks like an industrial town. I was like, oh, great. So I passed the industrial town, and it's like pretty sure that I'm going to hit a gas station somewhere on the other side of town. So I drive through, nothing. Now I'm into the countryside. And I'm like, okay, we're going to hit something. We're going to see. So my cell phone, which was my GPS, everything, it was all my data, my search engine, everything. I was out of signal because I was a little bit out on the countryside. And so I didn't have an expectation as to when I can hope to see the next gas station. And so now as I'm driving, it's come to the red and it's hitting almost landing at the bottom of the red. And then I said, okay, listen, this is now gotten too far. I've played my luck hard enough. So it's now stretched it. And I said, you know what? I would probably, based on my calculation, I can probably make 3 to 4 kilometers, maybe 5 at best. And I'm seeing myself going into the boonies. I'm seeing like complete open fields at this point. So I don't hope to see something in 5 kilometers. So I randomly pull up at a place in the middle of the highway where I see 2 old barns. They look like some sort of a corn, storage area, something like that, like a granary or something like that. And so I look on one side. So I'm stopped on one side. I look on the other side, and this is man standing there, probably waiting for a ride or some such. So I go and try to talk to him in English, and he doesn't understand a word of English. And so through sign language and a little bit of the downloaded Google Translate, I try to make my point. I'm like, listen, I'm completely out of fuel. Where's the next closest gas station? Or is there another chance of getting gas? And the guy looks at me and like, you don't understand what I'm saying. And he's like, he's pointing me in that direction. I know I have to go in that direction. I just don't know how far. All right. So I give up, and the guy's bus or something comes, picks him up. He leaves. And then now I'm standing there. And so I've tried one and I look on the other side, and this is a rundown, completely beaten up old shack. And I'm asking myself, wait, I don't even think anybody lives there. So, but you know what? I don't have an option. I've already tried one side. Now let's try the other side. So I go there and I start shouting. I said, hello, anybody there, in English? And then dogs start barking. And I was actually quite pleased that there was some sign of life there. I didn't expect anything there, looking at the state of that place. And so dogs start coming towards the gate. And then slowly after that, there is a voice of a person, coming behind those dogs. And I'm like, okay, great. So one thing accomplished, I'm able to meet another human being. And I don't know how I'm going to communicate my issue, but let's at least, be happy that there's a person there to talk to. And then the person approaches the gate and I start talking in my only mode of communication, which is English language. And I said, I'm out of gas. I don't know where the next gas station. I don't think I can make it. Can you help me? And the guy says, let me see. In English, perfect English. At that point, I was startled. I was like, oh my God, what just happened here? And then the guy walks to another barn, another more dilapidated shed kind of a thing, goes in there, picks up a can, a 5-gallon tank or some such, full of diesel, comes to me with a nozzle and everything, fuels my vehicle. And then I asked him, how much do I give him? And, he asked me something and I gave him more than that. I was more than grateful for what he had done for me. And then I had begged that question, like in my mind was gnawing me, like, what is this guy? Where did he end up in? Like, finding English speaking people in Romania, let alone the countryside, is very hard. How did I end up meeting this person? I said, what are you doing here? And he tells me his story. So he says that he is the driver for the ambassador of Japan in Bucharest, the capital. And then he was detected with stage 4 cancer. And he had an appointment to get that part of his body operated on. And the operation was scheduled for next day after when this conversation I'm having with him. So it's absolute that next day. And he said, I wanted to get away from all the city and all the hustle and bustle. And I wanted to go and rest up. This is my family's property that, nobody's cared for. I said, I had a little shack here. I said, this is a place that is going to be much better for me to wait than being in the city. So that's what I'm doing. And I was like, oh my God, what are the chances that this person who is going through this, and I'm sure the feeling of gratitude and the happiness that I felt having found this person, this angel in the middle of nowhere. But I also feel the opposite of which, how he must have felt from his lens, being able to be there for somebody who was stranded in the middle of nowhere without speaking the language. And that must have put a small smile on his heart when he went into surgery the next day. So folks, you have to allow life sometimes to surprise you. Sometimes we think that everything that needs to be calculated, planned, analyzed, and worked out to the little detail. And stuff doesn't work that way. Instead of going and saying, I don't know what's going to happen, right? I could have said that, oh my God, what's going to happen? When the fact of the matter is, you don't ever know what's going to happen. You never know. There's no recipe for anything in this life. There's so many variables that life will take its own course. Instead saying, let's see what will happen. So what I'm recommending is do what you need to do. So back to the story, I had the agency to stop. So, so there's a part of that dance where you need to step up and do something. So I stopped, right? I didn't just keep driving till the tank completely emptied out and I was like stuck in the middle of nowhere. So I stopped and I walked to this one person and I walked to the other person, and miracles happened, of course, is beyond my imagination, but there's a part of it where you do certain things, but then you step back and say, you know what, at this point, you've done what you needed to do, and sit back and watch the world's watch the universe reveal what is its magic, what its plans for you are. Now, some things cannot be forced. You cannot make things happen. So the only thing you can do is to do your part and then let it happen. And this is true with anything to do with the universe. For example, even your physical body. Imagine if you had a fracture, if you had a sprain, if you had something where you had to go see a physical therapist. And what does a physical therapist do? He will look at your situation, listen to your condition, what happened, what brought you to this point, and then she will recommend a set of exercises and some rest. So think about these two aspects, exercises and rest, as two parts of this dichotomy that we're here to talk about: making things happen and allowing things to happen. So you need to do the exercises. That's necessary. But then after you do the exercises, you need to stop and say, I have to let it be, and allow the body, in this particular case, nature, to do its part. You can't force it. So if you didn't do the first one, nothing's going to come out of it. Or if you do too much of the first one, too much exercise, and saying, you know what, I'm going to speed up this whole recovery process, guess what? You're going to go and basically stretch that rubber band or stretch that to this limit where it's going to break, and then you will be worse off than before you started. So there needs to be that trust and say, you know what, I got to do my part, and then I'll have to let it rest. I'll have to let it be, and I have to watch for it unfold. Now, there's no certainty. Now, so here's the part. It's not like, all of this is a recipe that is bound towards fruition. You don't know, because everybody's body is different. Every situation, circumstance, and every break, every crack, every sprain is different. So we don't know how the body is going to react to these set of exercises and rest. But that's what you do. You allow, with the faith that you've done the best of your abilities, and then you have to step back and allow life to play its part, allow the universe to do what it has to do. Here, now, the truth of the matter is, we all have a natural style. Now, when I talk about natural style, some of us are the doers, some of us are the faith-driven, the believers, right? Sit back and watch the power of manifestation, putting out positive thoughts. Now, regardless of which camp you fall in, there will be discomfort. For the camp that wants to keep controlling and doing things, the yielding of it and saying, you know what, now it's time for me to stop, and now it's time for me to let go, that is going to be very uncomfortable. And then the ones who are the believers, the ones who are driven by faith and the power of manifestation and attraction, etc., sitting back were like, okay, how long? Could I have done something? Am I doing this right? Am I deserving of the situation, right? So regardless of which camp you fall in, there will be some discomfort. But the beauty is that that discomfort is what is going to be the basis of you getting to that level of the next level, that innovation that's waiting to happen. Because think about it. Any kind of innovation that mankind has ever brought about was because they were uncomfortable with the situation, with the status quo. So think of it this way, that the discomfort that you're feeling, being in that limbo, striding that unknown territory, is the price of something legendary that's waiting to unfold. And fear is just the growth coming to get you. Fear is just the growth that's coming to get you. So the fear is what is going to, when you feel the fear and go ahead and do it anyway, surmount it anyway, that's going to be a new bar. That's going to be who you are. And think about it. All of these little victories, big or small, one victory results in giving you just the strength of conviction, faith in yourself, self-respect, for you to attempt the next mountain and the next mountain. And then those mountains can be very small things. And remember, small victories lead to more and more goodness. Think of stories in your life where you, for example, I'll just share with you my ability to give workshops. I now speak in front of hundreds of people, sometimes even in front of thousands of people at certain conferences, etc. And people say, where do you get that confidence? Where do you get that comfort? Are you probably born with it? Absolutely not. I'll tell you a very funny thing. When I was in school, grade school, I can't remember, middle school or some such, there would be the English teacher. She had this very, in my opinion, cruel exercise where in our non-detailed book, she would ask Julius Caesar, what have you, right? So she will say, every person in the class reads one stanza, right? So it's like a kind of a little bit of a daisy chain thing. So you stand up, starting at the back row. She always would do that. She would make sure that we start at the back row, not the front, the good boys and the girls in the class. And so I would try to change my seat to try and avoid. So the bell rings, hoping that, I don't have to get my turn. But, you can't get away with that. And, you're caught. So it would be my turn. I tell you, in full disclosure, I would be so nervous that my hand would be shaking. And as I'm reading a sentence, I would be so nervous, and just in front of my little classroom, right, that I would skip one sentence and go to the third. For example, I'm reading, sentence one, sentence, line one, line two, line three. I would just skip line two completely, not even knowing I skipped line two, because I'm so nervous because my eyeballs are all kind of shattering along with my hands are shaking. And then, it'd just be a complete mess. Now, if you go from there to the person that you see here talking to you right now, it came from small experiments. So I remember one of my public speaking forays was when I was in university in Austin. And I started a meditation club just because I was interested in it. I was just like, there's no other club, believe it or not. In the late 90s, there wasn't a meditation club on campus. It's not even really a meditation center in Austin. There were some that started and stopped, and there was really nothing consistent going on. So on campus, I decided to start one, and every Saturday get together. And because of my interest and my real deep love for this subject, I would get in front of the room and I'd, introduce the, thing, here we are to do this and that. And then, we'd sit down and meditate, and I'll play a recording for the most part. And then slowly I would introduce, where I was reading a small excerpt from some spiritual teacher, what have you. And so I had a group, I don't know, maybe 6 people at the beginning, probably, at the end of when I graduated from college, must have been, 25, 30 people in that group. And I graduated and then got a job in the same city. And then my home became the meditation meeting place. And then I became known as a teacher, not because I wanted to be known as a teacher. It's just because I loved what I did. I loved my practice, and I just kept my doors open for other people to join me. So fast forward 20 years, this is what I do. This is what I do. I think this is the gift that I've been blessed with. That is, I think, the single most valuable thing that I can offer to somebody in this world, right? And so it all started with those little things, folks, because those little victories lead you to having faith, lead you to having more sense of goodness and engaging in this virtuous cycle. You all heard of the vicious cycle, how, little things that, where you don't tend to believe in yourself will lead you to the state where you can go down the path of, having absolutely, no self-respect, and, any sort of abuse to the self that you do comes from the state of, going down that vicious cycle. So think about this and say that, don't attempt big things, and ask, what can be small things that I can accomplish today? Probably reading a nice excerpt before I go, right? Reading a nice passage, having a good wish, sending a blessing to the world, eating healthy, signing up for that class that you always want to do. Now you're in Zoom, so you don't have to be embarrassed about taking up that favorite dance of yours or taking up that, acting class, what have you. And you'll notice that with those small accomplishments, you will feel that sense of clear-mindedness, that faith that starts building inside you that will want you to accomplish, okay, what's the next thing? I got this down. I can do it. With that spirit, go and attempt at the next thing that you wanted to do and the next thing you want to do. And before you know it, you'll be rolling in your complete magnificence, your brilliance, and your bliss. Go ahead and start it with small things. Now, there's a famous quote from the East. It's in this Bhagavad Gita, where you might have heard of this shloka. It's called Karmanne Vadikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana. Ma Karma Phale Bhutu Ma Te Sangotsa Karmanye. So what that says is that you have control over your action, but you cannot control the outcome. Let go of the outcome. Do not be driven by the results of your action. And also do not be disillusioned by your state of laziness or complacency. So action is your right. Action is your duty. The outcome is something, let the universe decide how it's going to manifest it. And I tell you, 9 out of 10 times you will be surprised. You will be amazed at what the results of that little effort, that little steps. And it'll be something outside your scope of your imagination, because you see, our imagination is so funneled. It's so narrow. Our ability to conceive the possibility of outcomes is very limited. And yet, if you do it for the sake of just doing it, doing your part, and letting it be, the ripple effect, right? Remember, we talked about this in a few weeks ago. Cause and effect is a law of the universe. There will be some effect. There will be some repercussion. There will be some outcome. And that outcome will come in ways not the way you wish, but will come to surprise you. So now I want to talk about 3 things that you must consider as you're playing, or you're doing this dance between making things happen and allowing the outcome to manifest. Okay, so here's a formula for you. I ask that you pick 3 actions. You're working on something. Pick 3 small things that you can do that will help you accomplish your goal. Okay, so pick 3 simple things. Take that step, right? So do those 3 things, and then walk away. Take a break. Go get out, go breathe some, take a deep breath, go to yoga class, do meditation, go for a walk, whatever it is, but give up being the general manager of the universe where you have to control things. You do not control anything. So that's an illusion to start with anyway. So go ahead and just be. After being, I want you to measure 3 things about what happens next. First, notice the shift in your productivity. Notice how you're engaging with what you were doing. What results and opportunities magically show up? That's the second thing. Now, as I said, it may or may not be directly related to the actions that you took. But there will be something. There will be some feedback that you get from the universe. There will be some sort of a response to that. Just sit back without any expectation, without any judgment. Watch what that is. And the third thing is notice, and this is very important, notice how you feel. Are you enjoying this journey of this doing and manifesting that dance? Is this more fun way to engage with what you're doing? Are you feeling less pressured? And if this is working, if this has been fun, if this is being something where you're feeling more efficient, keep trying it. This is your formula for doing that beautiful dance between manifesting and letting it unfold. So folks, now I'd like for you all to shift into an internalization exercise. And while we do that, the first thing that I ask you to do is give me some big shoulder rolls. As you're taking in some nice, deep, comfortable breaths, go ahead and lift your shoulders, rise it up and drop it back. See how far you can go up for the shoulders to touch your ears. Relaxing all the way down as low as you can drop them. And then now reverse the direction. If you're rotating back to front, now go front to back. So the other direction. Again, lifting up your shoulders as high, close to your ears as you can, and then letting them drop completely. Breathing and synchronizing your breath with this rotation movement as you do so. And then from the body, now let's drop into the heart space. Continuing the deep breathing into your abdomen. Noticing the rise and collapse of your belly, not your chest. This meditation exercise is a process of recentering yourself. And breath is a tool to turn your attention from what's going on out there to feeling what's happening in here. As you turn your attention with this deep breathing, you may notice the chatter inside your mind. Rather than struggling with them, trying to stop or avoid, just embrace them. Observe them. And investigate them to find out more. Make sure you're breathing easy. And let's have gratitude for even the simple act of breath. If I'm able to breathe right now without a ventilator, I'm more fortunate than hundreds of thousands of people around the world today who need a ventilator to keep them alive. And notice that breath is a miracle in itself. Notice that breath is happening by itself. You don't need to control it. In fact, the more you get out of its way, the chances are the more deeply you're breathing. Life is happening on its own. You don't have to force anything. And if you're breathing right now, there's more going right for you in your life than not. So let's pour our energy into what is going right. There is a signal that tells you how wise or unwise you are in the way you meet what may happen. If you react emotionally to any external situation, person, or event, it is a sign that you're trying to control what you can never control. Any force usually means there is some resistance, and therefore an absence of acceptance, which means you're back to your old ways of trying to control the uncontrollable. Moving away from forcing to a loving has to be something you can practice every day, almost everywhere. The truth is, you cannot control anyone or anything at any time, nor any object more than 3 feet away. So why even bother? Why the habit of force? It's just learned and can therefore be unlearned if you so desire. Practice this. Practice transforming forcing to allowing. And visualize a scene where you had tried to force an outcome. And notice how it would have been had you stepped back and allowed life to unfold in its own way. With this checking and changing, there will be no more struggle. Notice how you feel right now. And if you had to summarize how you feel right now in one word, what would that be? Gently bring yourself back to this circle at your own pace. And I'd like for you to share what came up for you during this meditation. And one of the typical questions I get is, what is the background that you're using in this session? So this background is from Lake Tahoe in the winter. I had gone skiing, and then I was on top of this mountain, took a chairlift all the way up. And then instead of going down the mountain, I just looked to the side and I'm like, oh my God, look at this glorious sky. And so this was a picture from my phone, believe it or not. And yeah, Lake Tahoe, which straddles California and Nevada. Okay, so I'm getting a few comments and questions. Let me first take the question. What if one fails recurringly even after surrendering? How does one interpret it? That's a great question, Gitu. So I believe that the universe is like a parent. The universe is like a mother that knows best what needs for the child. And if something, despite my repeated force, is not happening, I have to have the faith that there is something greater that's in store for me. There's a better outcome. There's a better way in which I should be engaging. There's a better use of my time and energy. That's not that path that I thought is really something that is really not what the universe wants. It's really something that my ego is trying to make it manifest and saying that this is what I think is the best thing for me and for whoever else I believe it pertains to. So yeah, there have been times, and I'll tell you from my own story, when I was in in the corporate world, I used to interview. I was really a successful engineer at IBM. And there was a point in which I was quite satisfied and happy there. I could have retired. IBM was one of those companies that people used to work for, and they still do, work for the entire career from the beginning to the end. And then, there are these friends of mine who would nudge me and says, how can you be living in San Francisco, one of the innovation capitals of the world, and be working for a company like IBM if you're in Oklahoma or Texas? By the way, I got into that company, sure enough, to their point. I got into it when I was living in Austin. As I told you, I went to university there and I got hired out of college by those guys. It was a great company in those states, but they said that you can't be living in San Francisco and be working for a dinosaur like that. And I'm like, oh, really? So these thoughts enter your mind. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a point to be made there. I mean, to be heard. And so I took that as a cue, and actually with repeated urging and provoking me and teasing me, I was like, okay, I'm going to look out. And so I started interviewing, as I was quite recognized. I'd written a couple of books when I was working for the company. I was quite, well known, made a name for myself. So, and I started interviewing, and there'll be times where I would completely smash the heck out of this interview, right? I would just ace it totally. And the interviewing manager would stand up and give me an ovation. The team would be amazed at, how this guy, comes in, so I'll tell you one of the interviews, I'll tell you a little bit more nitty gritty so that you understand the level of competence that was required to ace this. This company, very well-known company, would ask you to take their product, create a demo with it, and demonstrate it to their experts. Just sit with that for a second. You never dealt with the product. You're supposed to download it, figure it out, create something with it, customize it, and you're supposed to present it back to the same team that is their bread and butter is to sell this product, okay? Now, to get a standing ovation from a company from that kind of crowd is not easy by any stretch. So I thought it was a done deal. But you know what? Something happened and that fell through. And I can't tell you how disappointed I was when that happened. But in the big picture, there was something more, something better for me to, experience, something better for me, which almost changed the trajectory of my life. And remember, I told you that discomfort is the mother of all innovation and inventions that has ever happened, right? So that sense of being able to see through the big picture and trusting that the universe knows. You've done what? I mean, in my case, in this example, I've done everything that I possibly could to the best of my ability. And this is again where my perfectionism comes into play, which it took me a long time to wind down that voice, to tune that part of me down and saying I have to be really extremely at top notch in everything I do. That doesn't really lead to happiness, unfortunately. You might think that, that leads to perfection, but think about it. The other side of it is that your quality of life. Okay, so that's my answer to your question there. So the next question is, what are your thoughts on visualizing outcomes versus no visualization? Oh, that's a very, very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. I believe visualization is a very powerful tool. So what is happening is that, you see, when I talked about those 3 steps, go ahead and pick 3 things, go ahead and do them, let them step back, watch things unfold, and then see how you feel, right? So that was the methodology I had laid out. Think of visualization as an action. Okay, now this is an interesting thing. It's not like you're doing something with your limbs, but visualizing is more powerful than what you can manifest with your limbs, with your hands and legs, and with your actual doing things. So think of it as a very powerful tool that is seeding into the universe, putting something out there that is triggering the whole chain reaction that is going to manifest into that outcome that you're wishing for. So visualization is huge. But then that's just one aspect of it. That's what it's doing to the outside world. But then what it's doing to your subconscious mind is, think about it, it's actually preparing you for you to receive that what you're visualizing, right? So there's that part of you that if something gets dropped in your lap, and if you're not ready for it, if your muscles and your body and your mind are not prepared to be able to take that on and run with it, what's the point, right? So the visualization is giving you, your system, your entire system, the preparation that it needs to let that thing manifest. So very important. Thank you for asking that question. So the next question is, action is so hard for me because I battle with perfectionism. Welcome to my world. I greatly valued what you said tonight. I am the believer, not so much the doer. What would your most basic few words of advice for me to drop my fears of not making the perfect decisions or fears of being judged by others and just do? You see, what you're asking, Katie, is you're asking me for a recipe, but if I didn't even offer you a recipe, you know what? You would figure this out. How would you figure this out? You will go through the motions and do what you need to do. So whether, it's a question of, you being in a dilemma, you not being 100% sure, we never are, right? No matter what, if you follow all of the recipes that I've laid out tonight, you still will not know for sure what's going to happen. But what I'm saying is, when you feel the fear, when you feel the discomfort and allow that to exist, saying that that has its part to play, I'm just going to watch it. I'm not going to let it take over. I won't feed it for it to start kind of growing in its size and its ability to grasp my consciousness and not allow me to think clearly. I won't do that. I'm not going to feed it. I'm not going to diminish. I'm not going to try to fight it either. Let it be, observe it, and go ahead and do it anyway. Right? When that happens, what happens, whatever's meant to happen is happening. You're enjoying the process. You're having resources that are still left, which you didn't burn out by the unnecessary, the raising of the adrenaline and, for all the toxins in your body because of your uncertainty and doubt and fear, the FUD factor, as they say. So you actually have time and energy left for you to go back after this thing is job well said and done, to go back and enjoy time with your family, enjoy time with whatever that you love to do, right? So you will learn and or overcome it anyway. What I'm laying out for you is a recipe of how you can enjoy the process. Great. How are you so humble? Well, folks, it's the life of hard knocks. I don't think I was always like this. I don't think I still am. I mean, it's still a journey for me. I appreciate the question as a compliment in some way, but let's just say that I'm standing here on the shoulder of giants. None of this, what I'm sharing with you, none of this ideas are mine. And there will be generations who had worked before me, and there will be generations who will pick up from here and develop this into much more articulate, much more actionable, much more useful advice for others. And so first thing is that I know that I'm a receiver. I have basically what we use this analogy in India of the butter that has been churned, right? So I'm eating somebody else's butter, like somebody who's done the hard work of churning the milk and the extraction of the butter. I'm just enjoying the butter, not really doing the work, you see? So acknowledging that, I think, is one of the steps that has helped me to stay grounded and stay real and be humble. And then the other process that I've mentioned here that, Dalai Lama always says that if you keep talking, you're only going to keep repeating what you know. But if you listen, maybe you'll learn something new. So I have learned to shut off that voice inside my head that says that I know, I can, I'm powerful, this and that, which is, the affirmations are good, but there are times when you need to quieten that and say, I don't know. I'm figuring this out. And as some of you who joined early saw me, I'm preparing for the session like a few minutes before. I have a pretty, busy day. I've had a pretty busy month, and it'll be the same case for, into the near future. And so this session is it's an anchor for me in the week. It's one of those milestones where I kind of try to build all of my roads leading up to it. And I, kind of plan and say, okay, this is the stop. And then after Wednesday night is over, I'm going to think about what's going to happen the rest of the week. So to me, this is a process, and I'm just, grateful that you guys are here every week. You're listening. I'm now noticing about 200 people listen to this talk after this is done. So I'm grateful that this time that we're all taking out to be here is serving people. Clearly, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't useful to you. But also, if you weren't here, I'd be talking to myself. So you see, humility comes from just going through you observe that how everything around you is helping you, is conspiring for you to be able to do what you're meant to be doing in this world. So with that, I want to say much gratitude for every one of you who comes here, joins, comments, shares it with other people, etc. And, I ask that you please continue sending your recommendations for topics that you want me to talk about. I believe that this was the last in the list of things. If I've forgotten any, go ahead and please resend it to me, remind me of it. With that, I'd like to ask you all to be safe, be kind, be distant. We're still going through the pandemic. As of today in America and in USA, we have had 200,000 deaths because of COVID. The epicenter has moved to unbelievably to states in the most remotest part of America, which is South Dakota and Iowa, apparently today are the epicenter. So who would have imagined this? Who would have imagined that this is, outside in the, right now as we speak, the skies was red all day today. We didn't have even a little bit of sun because we have these forest fires, these wildfires that have gone out of control, and the wind is keeping them in the state of California. So there's really no escape from all of this. So go in, go out, no matter what you do, you got to find your own bliss. So there's no seeking out for any external support. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time. I'll see you all same place, same time next week. Until then, be well.